All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA practice question series, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out behavioranalyst.study.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A behavior analyst is teaching a client to respond to a ringing doorbell by walking to the door. During training, the client learns to do this consistently in the presence of the doorbell sound. However, the client does not walk to the door when someone knocks or when the phone rings. What is the most accurate interpretation of the client's behavior? So we have a behavior question, and with behavior questions, we always want to identify whose behavior are we looking at. Now, the question specifies we want to talk about the client's behavior. We know the analyst is teaching the client to respond to a ringing doorbell by walking to the door. So we can say the doorbell is the SD, maybe walking to the door is the response. During training, the client learns to do this consistently in the presence of the doorbell. However, the client does not walk to the door when someone knocks or when the phone rings. Now, why might this be an issue if the client doesn't go when they hear a knock? Well, because there's multiple ways to say you're at the door. You can ring the doorbell, you can knock, right? So if we really want this behavior to be functional in a real environment, any way that someone could let the client know they're at the door, the client needs to respond to. Now, the phone ringing might not always represent someone being at the door. However, it still represents a form of generalization. So if you look at A, the client has generalized the behavior across stimuli. That's not true. As of now, the client is responding to the doorbell, but that behavior has not generalized to knocking or phone ringing. What about B? The behavior is under stimulus control of the doorbell sound. That's true. The behavior changes in the presence or happens more in the presence of the doorbell sound. And the response is part of a discriminated operant. That is also true. The client knows or responds when the doorbell rings, but does not when the doorbell does not ring. So B looks to be true. C, the response is governed by a motivating operation because it only occurs in the presence of a specific stimulus. Now, what does a motivating operation do? A motivating operation alters the value of a consequence and therefore temporarily evokes or abates behavior. Was a consequence, or was the value of a consequence altered in this scenario? No. We have an SD, which is the ringing doorbell. That's the stimulus that the response occurs under, but it's not altering a consequence, right? So there is not really a motivating operation presence, or the response is not governed by a motivating operation. It's only governed by the SD of ringing the doorbell. No consequence, or the value of a consequence, is not altered by the ringing doorbell. And then D, this is an example of faulty stimulus control, as the behavior is limited to one context. Well, if a behavior is only limited to a single stimulus or context, that isn't faulty. Faulty stimulus control might occur if behavior comes under the control of the wrong stimulus. So in this case, what is the most accurate interpretation of the client's behavior? It's B. The behavior is under stimulus control of the doorbell sound, and the response is part of a discriminated operant. All in all, not a very challenging question, but one that took a little more time to get through. What you don't want to do is start rushing through questions that may take a little more time, because you're going to end up missing an easy one like this just because you want to get it done with. A client is taught to open a sealed snack bag using both hands by pulling at the top. Later, without being taught, the client begins using scissors, teeth, or asking for help to open various types of bags. Each new behavior results in gaining access to the snack. What do these changes in behavior best illustrate? So I'll just say first, this is a good example of why we don't rush through question 1. Because question 1 took a little longer, but then we have question 2, which is going to be very easy. And any time that you feel you lost on question 1, you're going to make up on question 2. Now we're looking at the changes in behavior. The client is taught to open a sealed snack bag using both hands. So they have the bag. What do? They open it with hands. Now, without being taught, what is the client doing? They're opening it with scissors, or they're asking for help. So each time they engage in a new behavior, they get access to the snack. Well, if we look at our quick little diagram, what is this illustrating? Is it illustrating A, stimulus generalization, Well, stimulus generalization is kind of what we were just talking about. We have a response occurring in the presence of a single stimulus. What's occurring here, though, is multiple responses happening in the presence of a single stimulus. So, what we're actually seeing here is response generalization. We're not shaping because we're not talking about approximations of behavior. And yes, they are manding in one instance here, but we're talking about all the changes. And opening the bag by using their hands or scissors is not manding. So the changes in behavior best illustrate B, response generalization. Very easy question, right? One that when you're fluent and when you're comfortable with the exam, you're going to be able to complete very quickly. A behavior analyst is working with the client on identifying emotions. The client is shown pictures of smiling faces and asked to label them as happy. The client responds accurately to trained photos, but struggles with real life, facial expressions, or different cartoon styles. What should the analyst do to promote generalization? Now, when it comes to generalization, it is one of the most important things that we can do, if not the most important. If our clients are not generalizing, we're not being effective, and we have to be effective. We don't wait and hope for generalization. We plan and promote generalization. In this case, the analyst wants the client to identify emotions. So they have pictures of smiling faces, and the client says happy. They can do this now with trained photos, but they're still not doing it with real life expressions or different cartoon styles. So if you stop right there and just think logically, if we can get the client to respond to trained photos, right, of people smiling, how could we promote generalization against other cartoon styles or facial expressions? What could we use to increase that behavior or teach that behavior? A, increase reinforcement for responding to photos. That would strengthen what they currently can do, so not necessarily a bad thing, but it isn't necessarily going to promote our generalization to other stimuli. B, use shaping to teach the client to describe magnitude of emotion. Well, that might be later down the road when we want to enhance the skill, but right now we're just trying to generalize the skill. C, implement multiple exemplar training. If we started to train more examples, would that help with generalization? Would it promote generalization? It'd probably go a long way if we were implementing and training real life facial expressions in cartoon styles. So just because we want generalization to start to occur in some form naturally, we also have to push for it, right? So multiple examples is a great way to promote that generalization. And then D, delay reinforcement until the client starts to label real expressions. Well, if you delay reinforcement, then the skill they have might go away. So you might start fading reinforcement, but we don't want to stop reinforcement altogether in hopes that they will magically start labeling real expressions. That might have the opposite effect. So if we want to promote generalization in this scenario, we're going to implement multiple exemplar training. A therapist notices that a client is much more willing to complete difficult tasks right before snack time compared to immediately after snack. The client is on a fixed ratio of 5 schedule and is allowed to eat snack once his schedule is complete. What is most likely occurring in this situation? So we have a scenario question, and you've got to analyze what's happening. We know the therapist says or notices the client is more willing to complete difficult tasks right before snack time compared to immediately after snack. Now, if you stop there and think about that for a second, what possible cause could there be for the client completing tasks more willingly before snack than after? Well, the obvious one is they're deprived of food or snack prior, and after they're satiated. And when we talk about deprivation and satiation, now we're in motivating operation territory. The value of a consequence is changing the more they're deprived of snack. So if they're on a fixed ratio of 5 schedule, and they can eat snack once the schedule is complete, and they're doing it quicker when they're deprived of snack, what's happening? A, escape extinction has effectively reduced the client's task avoidance behavior. Maybe, but is there any information in this scenario pointing to this answer? No, we're not adding information. We need to use the information available to us. Just like in a real situation, use the information available to you. B, the proximity to snack time is acting as a motivating operation relative to task completion. Very likely. The closer they get to snack, the more deprived they are. Maybe they're hungrier. that consequence, the value of that consequence changes. And so they're going to start working quicker to get to snack. Once snack's over, they're no longer deprived, but instead satiated. B looks pretty good. C, food is the only reinforcer that this client is willing to work for during session. Again, nothing indicates C is the right answer. Don't add information that isn't there. D, the fixed ratio schedule is more effective than a variable schedule when edible reinforcement is involved. D just has no factual basis, so we should not even consider D as an option. What is most likely occurring here is the proximity to snack time is acting as a motivating operation relative to task completion. During a 30-minute session, a staff member records whether a client engages in humming at any point during each 10-second interval. At the end, they calculate the percentage of intervals in which humming occurred. This method differs from continuous measurement because why? Let's think. What is continuous measurement? If we have a 30-minute session, continuous measurement would record every single time the behavior happens over 30 minutes. If we're doing interval recording and we have these 10-second interval slots, are we capturing every time that behavior occurs? Well, no, because all the staff member is recording is whether or not the client engages in humming at any point during each 10-second interval. So if they hum 3 times here, if they hum 5 times here, and they hum, say, 6 there, when we calculate percentage of intervals in which humming occurred, each of these still counts for 1. So discontinuous measurement is going to miss a lot of behaviors. It can overestimate and underestimate, whereas continuous measurement often captures all behaviors. So how are we differing? A, this method includes every instance of the behavior as it occurs in real time. Well, we know that's not true because each interval counts as only 1 regardless of how many times the response occurs. B, it may miss responses that happen outside the observed intervals. Yes, if we're only taking these 10-second intervals and we're not doing more intervals, or we're only doing intervals for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, then we're not going to capture the behavior outside of any intervals we're actually recording. C, it provides the duration of each behavior episode. Well, here, clearly, we only have a frequency or a single response. In D, it provides the percentage of occurrence as well as the frequency of the behavior. It does not, because it happened 6 times here, and we're going to record 1. So how is it differing? Well, it may miss responses that happen outside the observed intervals. Is discontinuous measurement bad? No, but it has a time and a place, and it's used in specific situations when needed. Thanks for watching. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout-out. Work hard, study hard. We'll see you.